Welcome everyone. Thank you, Salim, and all the other sponsors for helping and volunteers for helping put this together. I see my role and this panel's role is to kind of lay the foundation for the rest of the day as far as what DevOps is, who we are, and kind of where it's where it's going. So let's start. We'll do a quick round robin here, and I'll start with the order on the slides. Although Salim, you just stopped sharing the slides, so that's. Can you reshare that slide? Is that possible, Salim? But let's start. Tess, if you would go ahead and just introduce yourself, and who you are, where you work, what do you do day-to-day basis, especially related to DevOps.
Hello, I am Tess Flynn. I am the DevOps engineer for 10.7. We run our own Kubernetes-based hosting with CI.
All right, day to day, do you manage that? Do you sell that? Do you?
We do both.
Okay, you do it all. All right, fantastic. All right, and Elli, good morning. So same question to you.
Hi there. My name's Elli Ludwigson. Pronouns are she, her. You may know me as EKL 1773 around the Drupal space. That is, oddly enough, no weird reference to the Revolutionary War. It's just my name on a calculator. I am the community and marketing manager at DDEV. We build an open source local development environment called DDEV Local. It's Docker-based, and that's part of our full dev to deploy platform, which does include Kubernetes-based hosting, as well as preview sites for staging and whatever else you'd like to do. And that's all pluggable. So if you want to use our hosting with a different local environment or our local environment with different hosting, it's sort of choose your own adventure.
All right, fantastic. And Albert, how about you?
Hi, I'm Albert Volkman. I'm the CTO and partner with Esteemed. Esteemed is actually the parent company of Drupal contractors. Our company basically, we started with the idea of, we had a large group of developers that were mostly friends, and they were looking for additional work, and we had a large influx of work. So we started just connecting people with a consistent stream of work without them having to do the sales piece of contracting. So as far as development goes, I've been a developer for 20 years. And more specifically, as far as like DevOps goes, I'm not necessarily a DevOps guy, but I have to use DevOps as a necessary evil for my day job. I'm personally a big fan of DDEV. I originally was on, I've used Lando and a bunch of others, but DDEV is kind of where I landed. And so my general opinion of DevOps is just, as long as you have a process and you stick to it, and everybody's aware of that process, then you're in a much better place than most companies. So.
All right, so let's. Albert, I'm gonna start with you on this next question. I'm gonna give each of you 15 seconds, and I'm gonna time everyone. So let me get my timer here. 15, and this is not meant to be easy, but 15 seconds to pretend I'm brand new to DevOps and explain it to me in 15 minutes. Give me a summary of DevOps in 15 seconds. All right, ready, Albert?
Yeah.
There you go. It's 13 now.
So providing a system that you can locally build your work and then deploy it to production and other levels of services. Sorry, I'm flabbergasted.
Wow, the timer.
Yeah, staging production. Boom. Yeah.
All right, Elli, you ready?
No.
Okay, very good.
Go for it.
On your mark, get set, go.
I would say that DevOps is a process of documenting the steps that you need to do to achieve your goals and deliver value to your customer, and then automating it and making your team successful.
All right, you can, if you'd like, you can give your extra 3 seconds to Tess. So Tess can have up to 18 seconds though. All right, so Tess, you ready?
I'm ready.
All right, here we go. Go.
It's not dev's problem. It's not ops problem. It's our problem. Let's fix it.
Okay, that was a little abstract, but it fits well. It fits nicely with Elli and Albert's, and Kevin hit the nail on the head in the. He kind of stole my line in the chat there, but there's not really one answer to that question. which is what makes this kind of like a very nebulous, at least for me, a nebulous, topic. It means different things to different people. So let's start with, let me go back to you, Tess. So in your day-to-day work, like what problem is DevOps solving? Like what's the crux of the issue that DevOps, kind of smooths out?
A lot of it, from my perspective, is how do we reduce friction for developers to get their code out? And how do we make sure that developers can do that consistently without any difficulty and can do it with a minimum amount of effort? And on the flip side, how can we make sure that ops personnel don't need to actually worry about that constantly, but only have to deal with emergencies, difficulties, and creating and fixing new systems? A lot of that comes down to making sure that when someone actually does a push, things happen the way they should, they happen consistently, and they stay up as long as they possibly can.
All right, so two things from your answer. Number one, it sounds a lot like the way you describe DevOps is the same way that a lot of folks talk about developer workflow. Do you think that's accurate?
I think so, but I think that it also depends on scale. I work for a small organization with a very convivial team that knows each other very well, which does skew how DevOps gets expressed.
All right, and then you also talked about the ops people. Now, in my head, I translate that to like sysadmins. Is that, do you agree with that?
That's correct. And one thing that's important for at least our organization is we don't really want to maintain a strict line between those two. We want to make sure everybody knows a little of each of them so that people are empowered to fix things that they need to. And if they know that something is wrong, they know who to talk to and have some idea of where it's failing.
All right, very good. Elli, let me go to you here next. When you're working with organizations or talking to folks about what DDEV Live does and your platform, how do what are some clues that you see or you sense that folks have an issue that can be solved with a better workflow? Like, what are some of the pain points that you've witnessed that you hear about?
Well, probably the primary thing is that people just don't understand their own process. And that's a matter of sort of sitting down and taking the time of writing it down, observing what you do already.
What's an example of like not understanding their process?
If you're just kind of releasing things on a haphazard basis, maybe a little ad hoc, you're like, oh, I need to throw this thing out into the world. I'm just going to push it up and call it a day. Or I need to make some changes to the live server. I'm just going to go log in and do that, and it'll be fine. Nothing's going to break. So that kind of stuff where it could be automated and a little safer, that's definitely a problem area.
Yeah, I think, that's kind of what I think about as well. I think about, when I think about DevOps, I think about automating things that are normally manually done. And if it's Friday at 4 o'clock, sometimes some of those manual steps are skipped. And, or, just by accident, some of those steps are skipped. Albert, how about you? So it's kind of the same question. I know you kind of live in a different context as far as you're not talking to customers about DevOps, but I know you have experience with this in some of the organizations that you've worked for.
Yeah, I would say, like, I was just trying to think about what DevOps means to me. And I think the big thing that it's accomplished for me is that, I hop between projects often, and having something like DDEV and just being able to type in DDEV config, DDEV start, and I'm off and running is light years beyond what it used to be. Bringing a new developer in and saying, okay, well, you need this version of MySQL, you need this version of Apache, you need this version of PHP or Redis, or whatever the setup looks like. Having that in code and just having a single command to start and go, and not have to think about that as a developer, that's gold. Because not all developers necessarily want or even care about the system that they're installing on. They just want to build a product. And so it's nice to have that kind of almost be like a non-issue now.
But how about on the deployment side of things? Like, what are some red flags that you've seen where you say to yourself, "Oh, there's an issue here. This is not a sustainable process that we have"?
Yeah, I would say going back to the versions again too. Like if you have a different, it works on my machine, and then you go and deploy it, and there's a different configuration, a different version of whatever piece of the software that's running, and all of a sudden it breaks, and they're like, why? And I think DevOps helps answer that why question, takes the mystery out of it a bit. So
so I guess what you're saying is having a good process can help solve that, because you're kind of predefining what that process is to go from the developer to the live environment.
Yeah, instead of Bill O'Reilly, let's do it live. Like you've already done the work, and you're a little more confident in your release process. So.
Right. Do you have any real examples or real world examples of where stuff has gone horribly wrong because there wasn't a good process in place?
Oh yeah, there's been many nights where I've been up until 4 or 5 a.m. and knowing that production's been down for 2 hours. Yeah. And that's not a good place to be. It hasn't been in a while, but that's why I believe so much in process, because I've felt that pain, and pain is one of the best teaching tools, right?
So do you equate a good, and I'm gonna ask this question to everyone in a moment, but do you equate a good DevOps workflow with automation?
Yeah, for sure.
Can you have a good DevOps workflow that's a manual process as well?
You can, but obviously every time you add a human element, there's room for people being tired or just being forgetful. I'm definitely a very forgetful person, so if a machine can do it, I would prefer the machine that's more trustworthy than I am.
Yeah. All right. Elli, let me come back to you. So kind of the same couple of questions there. Any horror stories that you've witnessed or been a part of as far as, let's say non-DevOps gone bad?
Okay, I do have one story I'm going to steal from our CTO, who told me that he was once working on a live server, like a top 50 web property or something, and he managed to run sudo rm rf / and wiped everything, basically. Pretty terrible. People lost some money there. So, the lesson is you shouldn't ever be on the production machine trying to do things like that in real time. So the DevOps solution is having the automation and processes in place so nobody is ever in that situation in the first place. So
do you feel as strongly as Albert that, a lot of DevOps, depends on automation as well?
Yep, definitely. It's that whole understanding the process and then automating it. And that takes the people out of the equation. So they actually wind up with kind of a safe space somewhere else where they can fail and it won't break things.
I'm sensing a theme that we as humans can't be trusted with this stuff.
I wasn't going to say it in quite that many words.
I think the nice thing about it though is it gives you it's almost like Git, like you have this history of changes that you have made, and you can feel confident in the past, and if something's broken, you can make an iterative change to that process and feel safe without, it's not risky anymore to make those changes, and you're also working toward a goal instead of being throwing darts at a dartboard. So,
and you can test that change in the process somewhere other than production as well.
Automation also helps a lot. Hi, my name's Will. Automation also helps a lot in turning hosting into a commodity. When you get these archaic servers with all these little custom tweaks that people have made along the way, and suddenly your host networking card goes bad, but nobody's figured that out for another week to come, then you have an exit strategy when you have automation.
Right. Tess, how about you? Any horror stories, DevOps gone bad? Or maybe not DevOps, but the lack of DevOps?
Well, lack of DevOps, one thing that was a constant problem for us because we used to manage a lot of older sites around the PHP 5 to PHP 7 transition. And a lot of those were on, say, shared hosting where you can't update the PHP version, period.
Mhm.
And despite our best efforts, we couldn't get them to move to other hosting that had updated versions. So they were stuck on these older versions. And some morning, some evening, someone would run updates. Everything would look fine on their system. They'd fire it down the hole. And the next morning, it would be completely broken. And that's because someone used 2 square brackets on PHP 5.3.
Right.
And we managed to get a lot of that resolved when we actually standardized our development environment on Flight Deck. So everyone was using the same versions, the same development environment, the same stack, and we match that to production as close as we can.
And Flight Deck is a Docker-based set of, let me see if I get this right. Well, why don't you explain it?
It's a minimalist set of LAMP-like containers for running Drupal and WordPress for local development and in live on Kubernetes. We actually use the same containers for local dev as live.
Oh, okay, fantastic. So do you agree with Elli and Albert that DevOps means automation?
I think it's a component of it. This
Okay.
whole thing is a bit like Cthulhu, isn't it? It's more than just one thing. It's a lot of different things.
Sure.
One of the lines that keeps coming up from me, at least, is tools don't matter. Tools don't matter. People matter, but tools don't. You can do a number of different things very well with different tools, but it really comes down to the people that are running that. How much trust do you have with them? Are they knowledgeable on those tools? Do they know how to use it? How is their mental health? How is their workload pressure? A lot of that comes into effect on how that reflects on the kind of work that they do and the kind of problems that come out of that work.
So I noticed you didn't use the word process in there. Oh, go ahead.
Because in my opinion, process is a outgrowth of corporate culture. So really the core of my perspective for DevOps is you need to first establish a culture that supports your business goals and your operations, and everything follows from that. Without that, you're just imposing rules upon some creaking, unknown globular framework that you don't even know what is underneath it. And eventually you might be able to culturally refactor that out by imposing process on it. But process is something that goes on top of corporate culture.
Yeah. So I was thinking, as you were talking about the people and the tools, I was in my head, I'm thinking to myself, well, it's the people who define the process, which then defines which tools should be used. Is that a fair statement?
Not really, in my opinion. We could do the same kind of CI that we do in Ansible with Terraform, with Chef, with Bash scripts, with a very well-trained hamster, if they're a particularly well-trained intelligent hamster. But still, it all just depends. The tools don't really matter.
Okay. So I'm going to switch gears just a little bit. And I'll stick with you here for a moment, Tess. I've worked with organizations of all sizes and all sizes and budgets. Is there a project size or a budget level where DevOps really begins to make sense? And I'm asking kind of like, are there, I know a lot of folks here probably, some work for organizations, some might be contractors working on smaller projects, but like, is there like a minimum project size where, you know, you need to kind of have a DevOps component to it, or what about a project kind of signals that, oh, there needs to be some, and I hate to use the word process because I'm directing this question at you, Tess, and I feel like you're not a fan of that word, but I'm gonna use it anyway. Is there like a minimum, is there like you know, a project aspect that, or that triggers the use of, you know, well, we need to talk about DevOps now?
Are you doing it more than 3 times a week?
So that's a pretty good start.
Like, for example,
Right.
my own personal website doesn't need to really be automated to do a deploy, but it is automated anyways because I know myself and I know that I am way too stressed out and fried to do all of those steps correct each time.
Mhm.
So it's much easier for me to outsource that once when I get the scripting correct and then continue to use that going forward. So there are benefits even if you are a single developer working on a single site, which you are your own customer. But the more people that you add to a project, once you get 2 people, you really should start considering doing something if you haven't done it yet. If you're doing releases more than 3 times a week, you should probably do that too, because each one of those releases is an opportunity for failure.
So, you know, it sounds like, you know, and probably not a hard and fast rule, but it's dependent on how often the releases are and the size of the team.
Also, where your comfort level is. To me, it's a gut check. Like,
Right.
are you fine doing your normal manual release process? Are you fine with that? If you are, then keep doing it. But eventually, you're going to find out, why am I spending all this time doing this when I could have a script do it? And I only have to spend 3 hours to write a script versus using 3 hours in aggregate monthly in order to do manual deploys. There's very little reason to not do automation of some sort right from the start.
So, Albert, based on what you told me earlier, I'm going to guess that you agree with what Tess is saying.
Yeah, I mean, I always go back to the other side of the equation, just the local development, like, because I consider that DevOps as well. Like, I like that. Anytime I start a project, I immediately use that just because I don't want to go through the setup hassle. But yeah, going off Tessa's point, like anytime that there's more than one chef in the kitchen, like there's room for different opinions on how things are handled, or maybe things aren't communicated as well as far as expectations of how things should be done. And you know, production isn't something you want to mess with.
So, and I'm going to stick with you for this because I know you have some experience, you know, working in organizations as a developer, as a project manager type role. How much overhead does this type of automation add to the project initially? Like, is this something, you know, let's just say a medium size, like Drupal project, it's got 2 or 3 developers, it's hosted on, you know, somebody like Aqua or Pantheon or Platform, or, you know, one of those services that has some workflow already defined. Is this something, in order to kind of set up a solid, reliable, reproducible, you know, well, not reproducible, but automated deployment system, is this something that initially is going to take a week for someone to set up? Or, and I realize that
Yeah.
you can, you know, there's all different ways to set it up and all different levels, but like, kind of what's the average? Like, is this something that is a huge add-on to a project or a tiny add-on to a project?
Yeah, depending on the environments that we're talking about, it can be pretty minimal. I mean, like, you're not setting up like Chef or like a Jenkins setup. Also, you know, if you're already comfortable doing something, like it's almost like something you don't really even think about. It's just part of your process. Like, that's kind of like escaping your question. But I mean, I think generally maybe like additional 4 or 5% of time, if you have a good process in place. Yeah.
All right. Elli, let me come back to you. And I just forgot the question I was going to come back to for you is, Oh, well, we'll skip the one that I can't think of. But based off what Albert says, when folks come and you talk to folks about your platform, what are some of the problems that folks are coming to you to DDEV Live to solve? Like, are they coming because mainly they have no workflow right now and they need to get themselves organized, or are they coming because they want to move to more of a Kubernetes platform? Like, what problems are they coming to you with?
Well, back on the subject of tools, there are so many tools out there, and DevOps is not the tools. So it's just one of many options that you could choose as part of your DevOps process. Just gonna put that out there first. But I think the problem people are trying to solve is just trying to leverage that power of Kubernetes without having to learn it. Just kind of the same thing we started from with DDEV local, right? You get all the benefits of Docker without needing to know Docker. So same idea.
But are there specific, issues that folks are having with, I don't want to call it like traditional hosting, but non-Kubernetes type of hosting, but traditional, I have a server over there, I'm going to do a git pull into it and move on. Is it just wanting to automate things more, or wanting to have more scalability, more performance, or a combination of what I just said?
Combination of what you just said. And I noticed Kevin threw into the chat here a note about flexibility, which is also something that we're really focused on, is offering flexibility both for your personal process and to connect to other tools. So part of the idea of DDEV Live is that it's very pluggable, is one word you could use, I guess. You could just take your API token or whatever over to your CI/CD tool, plug in there, just plug in different pieces of your process, and really get your custom workflow that works for you and your team.
All right, very good. Albert, back to you for a new question. What's the, when you first started experimenting with DevOps workflow, what's the biggest mistake you made? Or are there none? Because that's just the way you roll. And Tess, I'm going to ask you the same question in a moment as well.
So I would say, I think just going back to the automation piece, like I remember one of the first marketing agencies I worked for back when I was just kind of still getting my mind around like working with a team and working in more serious environments versus just the smaller projects that I had worked on myself. I think not being aware of which server you're on, I'd have like a shell open for dev and a shell open for production. And I'm happily typing away. And then you run the wrong command on the wrong server. And then get that feeling in your gut that, oh, I just did something really wrong. I can't recover from it.
Cold sweat.
It's like when you do git reset hard head and you're like, oh, I shouldn't have done that.
Yeah.
And I can't fix it.
How about once you started implementing solutions, automated solutions, are there any things that you were doing early in, while you were learning, that you now look back and say that was really stupid? Or
nothing comes to mind. I mean, I'm sure I did plenty of dumb things, but I would probably say the biggest thing is just familiarity with the tools, like not knowing that they could do what they could. And it's just like using Vim. Like you can open up Vim and start typing away and learn like the basics, but then as you use it more, you're like, oh, I can do this and I can do this and I can do this. And
I'm not gonna allow any more Vim talk in here. So we're gonna
shut down, canceled.
Tess, how about you? Any lessons you learned the hard way in this space?
Oh, I totally feel the pain about wrong terminal, wrong server. I have done that before. Some of my team members have done that before, where they're copying a database from, say, live to another staging environment to update it, and they accidentally overwrite live instead because they weren't paying attention to what they were doing at the time. Another war story of mine is when you break your entire automation process because you update some critical component. Like, I decide to update the container which runs the deploys for all of the company, and you get, I don't know, let's say you put a tab in there instead of spaces. Easy enough to do, and suddenly all of production is broken, and now you have to upload your role back to Ansible Galaxy. You have to rebuild your deployment container. You need to deploy that out to Docker.hub. You need to pull that down to Kubernetes, and then hope that no one is going to be screaming at you, "Why are my builds not working?"
Oh, actually, so I want to chime in. There was something I just thought of that anybody who's been in Drupal for any period of time, Drupal 8 saved for me is the headache that is reverting features in your environments and being like, well, why is this feature not reverting? It works locally.
Oh man, I am so glad for config management in D8 and D9.
100%.
That has made things so much nicer.
Absolutely. So Tess, I'm gonna stick with you here for a moment. Different topic slightly. I don't know if I want to ask this as pros and cons, or maybe just your opinion. So you can choose your own adventure there. But the question is, should folks kind of roll their own DevOps, or should they use kind of established solutions?
That really depends on the scale that you're going with,
Yeah.
isn't it? If you're deploying a single site, a bash script might be fine. If you're deploying a lot of them, you might want to look into another existing project. The thing is that deploying out Drupal looks kind of the same on multiple levels of scale. They all have kind of the same steps that need to be done. They might need to be done in slightly different methods in order to deal with those scales, but they all kind of look very similarly. The thing is that because of that similarity, there's a lot of different ways that you can do it. And there hasn't been like a single system. And what really comes down to is your buy-in. If you're going to have to use somebody else's system, now you have to learn that technology stack and how that works and how to configure it, how to customize it for your uses. And that might be a rabbit hole that you just don't have time, energy, or the mental wherewithal with everything happening everywhere, gestures broadly at everything, that you just can't handle it. And that's understandable, but it all comes down to what seems to feel right.
All right, so I'm going to go to Albert and Elli here in a second, but before I do, I want to kind of open things up for questions and comments to everybody watching. So feel free to post questions or thoughts in the chat. If you want to, turn on, if you actually want to speak, use audio and video, that's fine as well. Just put a note in the chat and let us know, and then I'll try and get to everybody. So Albert, how about you? Is there something that you would see in a project that makes you think, this needs to be custom? This isn't something that we can just put a basic, a basic workflow on? Like, at what point is it, a special, a special case?
Yeah, I think whenever you get outside of Drupal, like if you're doing integrations, and I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is Solar, but a lot of times like Solar is handled by a lot of these tools too. But like just going beyond that, at the point that gets really custom.
How about where does like a front end workflow fit into all this?
Front end workflow. I'm a back end guy, man.
Yeah, but there's definitely
like running your goal commands and whatnot.
Yeah, running it for production without like the SAS map files and all that stuff. I mean, that seems to be part of this equation as well in some cases. I mean, it doesn't have to be. That can be stuff that the front end developer just knows that their commit needs to contain production code. But there's definitely projects out there where the SAS is committed and the CSS isn't, and that's done on as part of the process to a remote environment.
That's actually what we do at 10.7.
So
I think the issue with that is like anytime you need to rebase, you're having to go with every commit and rebuild the SAS or the CSS for each level, and that's frustrating. Obviously just a small pain point, but it's nice to have that as part of the build process if you can. Right.
And Elli, knowing that your organization is kind of in this business, is there something that when you're talking to customers that you see where you think to yourself, wow, their use case is right in our wheelhouse versus they're doing things that are a little bit oddball and a custom solution might be better for them? Are there like any specific things that you see where that decision becomes clear, or that distinction, I should say?
Whew. Offhand, I don't know. It seems like everybody kind of needs a custom solution at this point.
Right. But I mean, to be fair, most providers, do allow for some level of customization in like deployment scripts and such. So I think it's probably just, going back to like what Albert said, in his example about, needing, a solar server. Is that something that is, possible or not possible with, any given platform? All right, so I'm going to look at the chat here. Salim, build versus buy, maintainability versus customization at scale. So Salim, you want to chime in on this comment? And you're probably muted, so maybe you are chiming. Oh, there you are.
Yeah. There's always the thing about, how much can you customize, especially when you're buying a platform, how much of it can you customize? But at the same time, when you're building something, if that skill set is, with one or two people in the company, you're totally dependent on them. And if they leave, you're screwed. Or if they go on vacation, or sometimes they can't even go on vacation because then, what do you do? So your whole team is kind of stranded. So, I think there's a balance, because if you've got something that's built in-house and you've got a small team and those people know what everything is, then I think it's fine. But if you've got a bigger team, then I don't think if you have like a big system that's built in-house, then it becomes difficult to maintain and difficult to scale and difficult to manage over time. It just becomes a bespoke system, and there's a lot of snowflakes in there. So
right.
It's my 2 cents.
And it adds to the ramp up time for anybody that's joining the system. Like if you're using a non-standard tool, you have to take that time to be like, well, this is how we do things. So, which can add a lot of overhead to the project.
Yeah. Well, there's also, go ahead, Salim.
No, I was going to say that Albert's probably familiar with that, because they work at staffing folks at different companies. So.
I think it's also important to take into account the and this is like as a contractor coming in on a project, or as an organization who's hired to build out a site for a client. Say an agency, that agency has to take into account the kind of the staff who they're eventually going to be turning that project over to, right? So as an agency, if you're implementing some automated tool, some automated system involving all these tools, when you turn that over to the organization, if there's no one at that organization who is familiar with those tools or even interested in learning those tools, that can be a big issue. So even though automation might make sense, from the agency's standpoint, it has to make sense for the organization as well, because ultimately they're going to be the one taking care of that puppy, moving forward. So that's an issue I've seen a couple of times, where I come in on a project, kind of help, well after it's been launched, and and I'm talking to the potential client, and an agency built this project for them, but the client doesn't understand like the build process, and so they're now starting to take shortcuts, and it can be very painful learning experience for everybody there. So Ryan, I see in the chat, I could read what you wrote, or do you want to unmute yourself and just talk about what you wrote there?
Yeah, I think my personal DevOps experience has evolved over the years. Initially, when you're working with smaller teams or even working by yourself, DevOps is your responsibility, and you more often than not don't have the time, resources, or even the skill set to craft some of the DevOps solutions that we see out there today, which is why you probably tend to adopt one of the pre-built, robust, proven solutions out there, like DevPanel or DDEV or any one of those other solutions that have been mentioned. But as your company grows, or your team grows, and you work in environments where you're working with multiple products or multiple clients, like an agency environment, you realize that the DevOps experience kind of has to like shift and change depending on the needs and requirements of the product or project that you're working on. That's when you definitely need a DevOps team. It can't just solely be the responsibility of a group of developers or just one developer to kind of get that done, because that's when you run into a lot of problems, because everybody has their own opinion on how something should get executed. And then when you try transferring that to somebody else's desk for them to continue working on our projects, you start to get all of these conflicts that Albert was mentioning and so on, which are a headache. So DevOps to me is basically taking the developer out of that equation completely as far as deployments are concerned, and making it so that regardless of whoever the person is that's working on the project, they're able to produce the same results when code is deployed time and time again. And that's kind of difficult because, like I said before, projects and products change depending on all sorts of different variables. So it's hard to just adopt one product that solves all your needs, which kind of leads me to my other question, what I wanted to pose to the panel is how do you solve for that? How do you create a DevOps experience that's super beneficial to the developer, removes any doubt from their minds when they code something that it will actually be deployed as intended, but also account for the plethora of different scenarios out there when it comes on to like production environments and so on and so forth?
That's a big question. There's a lot of bits to that question.
And that's difficult to, well, I think that's difficult to do, right? Like to accommodate all those variables. I think you can do a 80-20 system or 90-10 system where you can cover most of the scenarios for deployments and automation, but you can't cover 100% of it. You can never cover 100% of it. And you don't want to cover 100% of it, because then you're just going to have too many edge cases in there, and they're just going to get, you're not going to be able to maintain them.
I think that question ties really nicely back to what Tess said earlier about it really starts with the people, right? It really, in order to get that type of buy-in, you have to have a team that understands the value of that buy-in. And whether that means, educating the team or hiring the right folks, I think ultimately for the developers to feel comfortable with that process, it has to be, this can't be like developers are over here on one side of the room and DevOps folks are over here on the other side of the room. Let's hope that everybody trusts each other. I think it's got to be one cohesive team. Anybody else want to add anything to that? I'm just kind of. All right, so I do want to, I know we only have a couple minutes left. I do want to ask the panel one more question, knowing that we have a lot of developers in the room. Is this, and so Elli, I'll start with you, and then I'll go to Tess, and then Albert to finish. The role of, if you're in an organization where you're still SSHing into the production server and doing a Git pull or something similar, who's best, I don't know, qualified isn't the right word, but where should, as a developer, I start with DevOps? Should me as the Drupal developer, should I be defining that process? Is it kind of a developer's role to do that? Or is this something where you go to a sysadmin? Like, where does DevOps kind of fit into the existing team, for folks who are just new to it?
Well, I think the first step should be a collaborative effort between everyone involved. It should be kind of led by people at the top. Like if you have a CEO or whoever, CTO, they can kind of provide the vision and some direction, but then the whole team should come together and talk about how we're going to make it happen and what we do today, and really document that process together. It has to be agreed upon and aligned on before you can do any of that automation stuff or adding any fancy tools or anything at all. So that's step one.
All right. And Tess, what if it's a really small team, 1 or 2 people and a client?
That's still very similar to what Elli just said. You do need to actually get everyone in the same room after establishing some kind of vision. The vision, we actually had this conversation at 10-7 when I was hired, which is, what do we want to do? How do we fix this problem that we have? So we lay out the problems that we have. We lay out kind of the direction we want to point ourselves in. How can we fix that? And we were in that room for like 3 hours to hammer out the initial process. And eventually we did actually come up with a pretty good basic methodology to streamline our entire deployment system. And over the next 3 weeks, we slowly refined that. And by the end of 2 months, we were able to revoke everybody's SSH keys because they didn't need to be into production at all.
And Albert, so just a little spin on the same question for you. When you're working, with contractors at Esteemed who are being hired for projects as developers, are they also taking a role in DevOps on some projects, or like where does DevOps fit into like the average Drupal developer's life as a contractor, I should say?
Sure. I think those conversations a lot of times start with, well, what are you comfortable with, and what do you have experience with already? And then going from there, obviously, if the developer is already comfortable with the tool, again, reducing those ramp up times and crafting a system that works for everybody is a goal. I mean, it's cross collaboration between someone who's setting up an environment and then someone who's using that environment. Like right now, I'm reading the book, The Lean Startup. It's been on my shelf forever, and I'm finally getting around to reading it. And they talk a lot about like how you can take all this time and build this perfect system. But if that system isn't actually serving the need, then it's a useless system and it's wasted time. So by having that collaboration, you're actually building the tool that's providing value. So yeah.
All right. Well, I think we're out of time. So thank you, Tess. Thank you, Elli. Thank you, Albert, very much for your time. I don't think there's any other questions in the chat. So I'm going to say thank you and turn it back over to Salim.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Mike, for hosting the session. And you guys, that was great. So, all right, cool.